So it is our first official meeting of the new year. Yay, we are here. Happy New Year. And I hope that this new year will be healthy, first of all, for all of us, for our families, our loved ones. I hope that all the bad stuff is left in the history of 2021, and then only the good stuff will be in this one, that our wishes will be fulfilled this year, and all the projects and good things that we are planning as Rotarians, as you know, within our club and in the district worldwide, that they will be fulfilled. Because that's what makes our hearts fulfilled, right? With happiness, that, you know, for everything that we do. And it gives me a lot of pleasure to introduce our guest speaker today. We have a really, really amazing guest speaker. Chester, thank you very much for, you know, being here with us today. I am not gonna do like a formal introduction. Chester asked to do a slightly different introduction for him. So Joyce, without any further ado, could you please run the video?
That works. We just did some mental athletic training with Chester Santos, who has the best memory in the United States.
With ease. Joining us right now is memory expert and winner of the 2008 USA National Memory Championship, Chester Santos.
If you have trouble remembering names, faces, where you maybe put your coffee cup, or if you do Chester Santos, he can help. He's a 2008 National Memory Champion. He's here to help us.
Certainly knows he does. Chester Santos is the United States Memory Champion. He captured the title this past weekend in New York City. There he is accepting the prize. He's now
you can count or see. He's got the names of every congressman and senator seen. Stack a decade ways from Sunday. He'll get it every time the international.
Who's the 12th District New Jersey Congressman? Rush Holt. Okay. Rush Holt.
10 of hearts.
Three to go.
2 of clubs.
Yes.
Jack of diamonds.
You got it.
And 3 of diamonds.
Unbelievable.
That's incredible. First of all,
we have Carol, Rick, Pedro, Jack, Andy.
Some of his techniques stretch all the way back to the ancient Greeks. But what's amazing is that standing in front of you as a modern human being, I can still feel those techniques reprogramming my brain to remember things better.
Chester, welcome.
Thank you all so much for having me today as your speaker. Happy New Year to everyone. My name is Chester Santos, also known as the International Man of Memory. Since winning the United States National Memory Championship, I've gone on to give presentations in more than 30 different countries for various types of organizations. I'm very confident that everybody out there has the ability to develop powerful memory skills and leverage those skills for more success in one's career, personal life. Also, if you happen to have any kids or grandkids that might be in school, what we talk about today is going to be useful there as well. It's going to be a fun and educational presentation. That's my goal. Now, in order to improve your ability to remember really just about anything at all, there are only 3 main principles that you need to have a grasp on. Principle number 1 is that we are very good at remembering things that we see. So when you have something important that you like to remember, you want to try and turn that information into a visual, something that you can picture in your mind. An example that I like to give in my presentations around the world, a situation we've all experienced at some point where we will run into someone that we could have met years ago. We may have met that person years in the past. Oftentimes, as soon as we see their face, right away, we remember their face. We know that we've met them somewhere before, but we can't seem to remember their name. right? Pretty common experience. Something else I think we can all relate to. Let's say you go to a party and you meet a lot of new people. 2 weeks after it's over, you're talking with one of your friends that was also at the party, and your friend describes someone to you. Your friend says, hey, you remember that attorney that we met at the party a couple of weeks ago? He's also a member of Rotary. As your friend is going through that description, a lot of times you can picture who they're describing to you, right? You might even be able to remember what the person was wearing that night at the party, but a lot of times you can't seem to remember the name, right? And sometimes your friend can't remember the name. It's very frustrating to both of you. A third and final example related to this: how many times have you been describing to a friend or family member an actor from a TV show or movie? As you're going through that description, crystal clear in your mind, you can picture the actor that you're talking about. Your friend or family member can also picture who you're describing, but neither one of you can come up with the name. And again, it's a frustrating situation. Those three examples that I just gave you, I think, illustrate pretty well that when it comes to dealing with people, we're pretty good at remembering people's faces, what they look like, but we're not nearly as good at remembering names. When you think about it, this makes sense because when you interact with people in various ways, you see their face. The face is recorded into your visual memory, but the name is something much more abstract to the brain. So one way that you can get better at remembering names is to turn them into powerful visuals. So if I meet someone named Mike, I might picture a microphone. If I meet someone named Alice, I might picture a white rabbit because that reminds me of Alice in Wonderland. It might seem a little bit silly, perhaps, but it's very powerful and effective. It's how I actually open presentations at conferences around the world with naming hundreds of people in the audience after hearing each name just one time. I'm going to get into names in a little more detail if I don't run out of time today, but for now, I just want you to note the power of your visual memory. If you can picture the information, it becomes easier to remember. Second main principle that I'd like you to become familiar with is beyond a visual, try in your mind to involve additional senses if you can. So in addition to seeing that white rabbit, imagine maybe that you can smell the white rabbit, you even feel the fur. As you activate more senses, you're activating more and more areas of your brain, you're building more and more connections in your mind to the information, making it easier to retrieve it later. So I actually starred in an episode of PBS's Nova Science. The episode that I starred in was titled How Smart Can We Get? Or maybe just Google Chester Santos, that's me and PBS, if you'd like. And you can watch actually the whole episode for free on the PBS website. So check it out later maybe. If you do, you're gonna see me on the show performing some crazy memory feats. Then they had me train David Pogue. You all might know David Pogue from the New York Times and CBS News. He's a correspondent for the technology industry. I trained him in how to improve his memory. And then he was able to perform some pretty cool memory feats after just that little bit of training. Next on the show, they had some brain scientists, neuroscientists come on and explain for people watching at home on TV, all right, how did Chester pull off those memory feats? How was David Pogue able to do it with just a little bit of training from Chester? And these brain scientists, neuroscientists confirm that it's because with these techniques that I've mastered over the years and that you're all going to learn a little bit about during the short presentation today, what's happening is we're recruiting extra areas of the brain that most people never involve when trying to commit things to memory. With these techniques, we're recruiting more of the brain. Part of this is learning to use more senses. All right, so to summarize that one, the more senses you use, the more of your brain's activated, the easier it becomes to remember. Now, the third and final principle that I want to go over is that in addition to seeing the information, trying to get other senses involved, if you can, make everything that you're experiencing in your mind crazy, weird, extraordinary in some way, because we tend to remember things with little to no effort that are out of the ordinary, that catch us by surprise. If wherever you're at right now attending this Zoom presentation, if in the room that you're in, if an elephant were to suddenly crash into the room right now and started to spray water all over you with its trunk, if that actually happened at this moment, you would probably remember that for the rest of your life and always tell that story. You're never going to believe this, all right? For our Rotary meeting, we had this memory guy on Zoom, and during his presentation, an elephant crashed into the room, started spraying water on me. You might remember that and tell that story 30, 40 plus years from now without any effort to commit it to memory. Now, to this day, scientists still don't fully understand how that works in the brain. How is it that sometimes in one instant, something will go straight into long-term memory, whereas other times we spend weeks, sometimes months trying to drill important information into our memory, and we have trouble with that. Although it isn't fully understood how it works, we just need to realize there is this aspect to human memory. There is this aspect to how our mind works, realizing that we can harness it, we can take advantage of it and apply it to things that would be very useful to remember. Names and faces to get more out of business networking, to build better rapport with people in general, right? Business, personal relationships are improved. Presentations, foreign language vocabulary, exam training material, and so on. Memory is a fundamental part of learning. So when you improve your ability to remember things, it suddenly has a positive impact on so many different areas of your life. We're going to try and put into practice now those 3 principles that I just talked about: visuals, trying to get more senses involved. We're going to make what we're seeing and experiencing crazy, unusual, extraordinary. We're going to try to put that together now with an interactive exercise. I'm going to have you all commit to memory the following random list of words. It's going to be monkey, iron, rope, kite, house, paper, shoe, worm, envelope, pencil, river, rock, tree, cheese, and dollar. Now, when I have live audiences and I can see everybody in the audience, usually at this point, I can see people looking at me like, you're crazy. There's no way I'm going to remember that. Not unless you give me a lot of time to do it. But in fact, you are all going to know those words forwards and backwards with just about 3 minutes of study time. That's it. And even weeks, I get people emailing me, even in some cases months later, wanting to demonstrate to me that they still remember all of the words and they can't believe it. How you'll pull this off, you'll just listen to what I described to you, see and experience it happening in your mind. That's it. Just relax, have fun. You saw in that intro video one of my CNN clips. There I actually had to memorize during the commercial break. I only had about 2 minutes to do it, a half deck of cards. And then when they came back live on the air, it was live, not recorded, a lot of pressure on me there. I had to recite that perfectly from memory. If you pay attention to those clips, you can watch them again later on my website. You're going to see that when I'm memorizing the cards, I'm smiling, I'm giggling. They may have thought I was a little bit nutty, perhaps, when I was on that show, or crazy, but that's the whole key to this, all right? If you all are smiling and giggling over the next few minutes, it's a good sign you're going to remember the word. So let's just give this a try, relax, have fun. The first word I had given you was monkey. So I want for you all in your mind, with your eyes opened or closed, whatever's more comfortable for you in terms of visualizing what I'm describing to you, a monkey. Just see in your mind a monkey. The monkey is dancing around. It's making monkey noises. Whatever a monkey would sound like. I'm working on my monkey impression. The point here is to try and really see and hear that monkey in your mind. Do your best. The monkey now picks up a gigantic iron, maybe like you would iron your clothes with, all right? It's dancing around with this giant iron. Picture that. The iron starts to fall, but a rope attaches itself to the iron. Maybe even feel the rope with your hands. May it feel sort of rough. Interact with that rope. All right, you look up the rope and you see that the other end of the rope is attached to a kite that's flying around in the air. Maybe you reach up and try and touch that kite. Really experience that kite in your mind. The kite now crashes into the side of a house. Do your best to see it really crash into this house. Picture that house. The house is completely covered in paper. For some reason, it's totally covered in paper. The next word I had given you was paper. Out of nowhere, a shoe appears and it starts to walk all over that paper. Maybe it's messing up the paper as it's walking on it, that shoe. The shoe smells pretty badly, so you decide to investigate and see why. You look inside of the shoe and you find a smelly worm crawling around inside of that shoe. Really see that worm. The worm jumps out of the shoe and into an envelope or envelope. Maybe it's going to mail itself. I don't know, but it goes into the envelope. Out of nowhere, a pencil appears. It starts to write all over the envelope. Really see that pencil. Maybe it's addressing it. Visualize it as best you can, that pencil. The pencil now jumps into a river and there's a huge splash like you would never expect to see when that little pencil hits the river. The river, you notice, is crashing up against a giant rock. It's crashing up against a giant rock. The rock flies out of the river and it smashes into a tree. Really see that? This tree is growing cheese. You probably haven't seen a tree like that. This one is growing cheese. And out of the cheese shoots a dollar. A dollar shoots out of the cheese. See that as best you can. Last word I had given you was dollar. Now I'm going to run through this again very quickly in about 30 seconds. And your job is to simply replay through this little story that you've created in your mind. So we had the monkey was dancing around with what? It was dancing around with an iron. Really see that iron. When it started to fall, what attached? A rope. The other end of the rope was attached to, see that kite? The kite crashed into the house. That house was covered in paper. What walked on the paper? It was a shoe. Something was crawling in that shoe. It was a worm. The worm jumped into the envelope. What wrote on it? A pencil. The pencil jumped into the river. The river was crashing into the rock. That flew into a tree, which was growing cheese. And what came out? A dollar. So now it should be pretty easy to recall for me all of those random words in order by simply playing through the story in your mind. Each major object that you encounter in the story is going to give you the next word. So I'd like to give you 2 or 3 minutes now to please do your best from memory to write those out in the chat box to everyone, and I'll pick out some random ones and read off the answers. At a minimum, try to go through it mentally, even if you're not brave enough to write it out in the chat box, because I'd really like you to try and develop this new approach, this new skill. And later on, I'm going to get to some practical applications of this. All right, 2 minutes, write them out from memory, the words in the chat box. We have some answers coming in, looking good. Okay, the first answer I had come in was from Laura Walters, and she wrote monkey, iron, rope, kite, house, paper, shoe, worm, envelope, pencil, river, rock, tree, cheese, and dollar. That was absolutely correct. I'm sure that you will all, if not get 100% correct on this, get very close to it. Can I get quickly one brave volunteer on video to try to recite those for us backwards? You'll just have to go through the story in reverse. That's it. Would anyone be brave enough to give it a try?
I'll try.
Jake will try.
Okay, cool.
I will give it a try. Okay. Cheese, tree. I'm sorry. I got help here, so it's actually the both. Dollar, cheese, tree, rock, river, pencil, envelope, worm, shoe, paper, house, paper house, kite, and kite rope iron monkey.
Great job. Perfect. You guys did well together as a team.
It wasn't
as a team
just
there.
Jake.
I got a little help.
He got almost all his help from me.
Great work
Actually,
there.
I forgot.
Right.
Nice work as a team.
Teamwork, just like every marriage should be.
Very well done. So I'm sure if you guys gave it, everyone gave it a try, you could do it forwards and backwards. Now I want to point out, this is not just for random words. I'll give you one quick practical application. Let's say you wanted to give it some sort of speech, presentation, talk, and you wanted to minimize the amount of notes that you use so that you can maintain eye contact with your audience, be a more persuasive speaker, speak with confidence when you minimize the notes. You could use a simple story combined with images for all of the major points and subpoints of your short presentation. So quickly, if I were to give a talk about healthcare in the United States, always a hot topic for discussion, I might just start out my story with the stethoscope that the doctor uses to check your heartbeat. That's just going to represent for me the broad topic of healthcare. My first talking point, I want to talk about the high cost of healthcare in the US, maybe shooting out of the stethoscope are a bunch of $100 bills. Maybe my next talking point that I want to hit on with the audience is that under certain healthcare programs, in order to get certain things covered, we need to find a way to navigate through or cut through a lot of red tape. Maybe wrapping itself around the $100 bills is all this red tape. So you can see how you could minimize the amount of notes. This could be talking points, meeting with clients, potential clients. Here are 5-10 key things I learned about you and your company in my research. Here are 5-10 key ways as to how myself, our company, our services are the perfect match for you. Nowadays, when you can do that, it's very impressive because the average person isn't working on their memory much nowadays. We've become very dependent on these digital devices. I think there's a little bit of too much digital dependency going on, but it provides you with an opportunity to stand out, be more impressive, more memorable in business. Quick time check, Marina. Do I have time to give a few tips on names and then take questions? Yeah. Okay. So quickly some tips for names, and then I'll take questions because I know I'm probably near the end of the 20 minutes or 25 minutes allotted to me. Tips for names. This is going to benefit you in your personal life, going to be beneficial in just about any career. I like to quote the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. In that book, it was written that the sweetest sound to a person in any language is the sound of their own name. And also that everyone's favorite subject is themselves. So in fact, by remembering people's names and things about them, it does help you to build better business, personal relationships. It builds rapport with people, right? So here's some steps to go through that should help you to remember names. Step number 1, whenever you're introduced to someone, try to immediately repeat their name, shake their hand if you can, or with a pandemic going on now, maybe do an elbow bump or something. But you know, if you're introduced to someone named John, just nice to meet you, John, or pleased to meet you, John. It might seem totally obvious, but a lot of times when someone is introducing themselves to us, our mind is all over the place. We're thinking about what we're going to eat later, or, you know, a meeting later. A lot of times we don't pay much attention to the name. This first step forces you to pay attention for at least 1 second. That's the only way you could repeat the name back to the person. Start doing that today. Eventually, it's going to become a habit, second nature. Step number 2, early on, ask the person a question using their name. So, John, how long have you been with Rotary? Or, John, how do you know Chester? Just use the name once early on. It's going to prevent that name from just going in one ear and out the other ear. Step number 3, try and think of a connection between the name and anything at all that you already know. So John, maybe that makes you think of John Lennon, somebody famous like that, or it could be a character from a TV show or movie that has that same name, all right? Thinking of a connection between the name and literally anything that you know is going to help it to stick better. Step 4, whenever you leave the party, the meeting, fundraiser, whatever type of function it might be, make it a point to actually say goodbye to people using their name. That's going to go a long way toward helping you to remember more of those names in the longer term. So simply, I hope to see you again sometime, John. And if at that point you've already forgotten the name, I recommend that you ask it again right then and there, because at that point in time, they're not as likely to be offended because they don't expect you to know it yet. I think at that point, they're going to appreciate that you're expressing that interest in them and that you care enough to know their name for the next time you see them. So those 4 steps are going to help you out a lot in terms of names. I would combine those, if you can, with trying to create those visuals that I talked about earlier, a mic, a microphone for Mike. Also visually try and link that to something unique about their look. So if this mic you think has cool or interesting looking hair, you might imagine that the microphone is getting tangled up in his hair. So the next time you see the person, you simply ask yourself, what's unique to me about their look? What you personally noticed before is likely what you're going to notice again, and the image that you've placed there of the microphone will come right back to you. So this is giving you a mental cue card or a mental note card to help you remember names. Now, I just quickly, in case I'm gonna take questions now, but quickly, in case anybody wants to learn more beyond what we covered today, I'm about out of time. I do have an entire online memory school, which actually simulates introducing you to people with a slideshow. So you'll see pictures. This is John, this is Nancy, and so on. It teaches you foreign language vocabulary. You go through sample presentations. It's just an entire online school, basically. The URL is memoryschool.net. You can visualize maybe a giant fishing net to remember that it's .net. So memoryschool.net. Normally there's a $200 enrollment fee. I have no idea who might be interested from your group, but I did set up code Brookline that will zero out the enrollment fee for 3 people. So if there are 3 of you that happen to be very motivated to develop some new skills for 2022, be one of the first 3 to use code Brookline, and it should take that $200 fee down to 0. And then all you'll be doing is paying for the monthly access for as long as you want to be a member of the school. So check it out. I'll put that in the chat as well, and I'll take questions now.
I will just, I was going to say, I never thought I would be able to remember those words, Mr. Santos. I always used to joke that they're never going to know when I have Alzheimer's because I've never had a memory. You know, could never remember a thing. I find this very helpful. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. This is also really good brain exercise. People are recommending nowadays, in addition to physical exercise, that it's important to do brain exercise. This is good brain exercise as well.
I have a question, if I can ask.
Yeah.
Go ahead, go.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I do a lot of speaking, and I find, and I'm assuming this is an age thing, but I find that I walk into something, whether it's court or a meeting or a presentation before a board or something, and I have all my details down, and I go through it, and suddenly something that was on the tip of my tongue is gone, and I can't think of it. And it eventually comes back, but I find that that seems to happen, not fortunately a lot, but it happens certainly more now at the age I'm at than I did 20 years ago. Is that normal?
It's totally normal. So there are biological changes that take place in our bodies, right? There are changes that take place as we get older. But also I would note that part of it is that most people tend to also use their memory in general much less later in life than they did earlier in life. And our brains are less stimulated in general later in life than they were earlier in life. So think about it during schooling years, kindergarten, elementary school, high school, college, grad school. We were always learning a lot of new things, and we were tested on our recall for quizzes, exams, to write papers. We're very much challenging our memory, right? We're learning a lot was new to us, but then we all reach a certain point in our lives where things are becoming more of a routine, right? Not that much is new to us anymore. So keep in mind that your brain's less stimulated in general. You use your memory less in general as you're getting older. So if you will make it a point to exercise your memory, work it out, you can keep it strong, get it stronger really at any age. For presentations using these types of systems, you have a reliable system. So you have something when you're blanking out on one of the points, for instance, in this case, you could run through the story. In the online memory school, I teach you what the Roman orators used. I teach you the exact system that Cicero himself used to give speeches hours in length from memory without any notes. It's something called the memory palace technique or journey technique. It's using locations from your environment to store imagery that reminds you of what you want to remember. But in that case, you can store even hundreds of data points in your brain. So keep that in mind as well.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask a question. Most of the things you're talking about are using short-term memory. Are there differences if you want to do long-term memory? Do you address that at all?
Yes, very good question. So you will find that automatically the information using these types of techniques will stay there a lot longer than if you did just rote memory. So if you were to, how most people would approach today's exercise, they would normally just read those words over and over to themselves, write them out over and over, right, until they drill it into their head. With approaches like that, you're not making the most efficient use of the brain. So it would be probably you can write them all out today, but tomorrow, a couple of days later, they probably vanish from your memory, at least most of the words. But with this approach, you'll know that definitely at the end of the week, even a couple weeks from now, especially if you'll just review it, once, run through the story once in a few days, you're going to remember it very long term, because without realizing it, you're using a lot of your brain to encode the information into memory. But all of these techniques are designed to help you take memory, the information from working memory, which is the memory that lasts for a few seconds or less, into short-term memory, which is minutes, hours, days, eventually into your long-term memory. These techniques help take the information along that path, so you have a better chance to eventually get it into your long-term memory.
So the more you repeat it, the better you remember it over a long period of time.
Yes, and for long-term memory, one other thing to note is that spaced repetition is very important as opposed to cramming. So 20, 30 reviews done today, how most students study, is not as effective as if you would just review it once today, maybe a few days later, maybe a few days after that. That's going to be more effective in terms of long-term memory. I talked with researchers at Washington University in St. Louis about this. While I was there, they were doing brain research on me along with some Jeopardy champions. And I asked them, how can I help students more effectively with what I'm teaching people? And they said to combine everything that I'm teaching, but really make sure that people are adding that component of spaced repetition, because it's so important for long-term recall.
I just want to ask you, Chester, how did you get into this work? How did you start this?
Oh, it was totally random. So I happened to just be flipping channels one night, and I caught a segment on ABC's 2020, that evening news program. There was a segment on the United States Memory Championship, and it caught my interest just because people had often commented to me, wow, you have a really good memory. So with those comments just in the back of my mind, when I saw that on TV, I thought, hey, people say I have a good memory. Maybe I can do well in this national championship. And I quickly found out when I looked into what the best people in the country were scoring, memorizing hundreds of names, hundreds of digits, decks of playing cards perfectly in just a few minutes, that I wasn't on that level. So that's when I started doing research into, okay, how can we improve our memory from where it's currently at? I found what seemed to work best for me personally, stuck to that subset of techniques, and now I train people all over the world. And the techniques that I feel work the best and that you can put to use, right away in your career and personal life, and to help kids in school.
If nobody else had a question, I wanted to go back to Jake's question. Is there anything that we can do to help us retrieve that stuff that we have on the tip of our tongues that just goes out of our head?
Yeah, so it isn't necessarily my area. My area is more using the techniques to encode the information properly in the first place that would be beneficial to you to know in the future. So actually, I'm geared more towards business professionals and students, because if you originally didn't encode it using these techniques, it would be harder for you to retrieve it. But these techniques make it much easier because, again, you're using more of the brain in the first place.
Richard.
I wonder if you could just say something about language, how the application to language. I understand the idea of if it was only applying to 50 or 100 words, but when you're learning a language, you're trying to learn thousands of words. How do you What's the application in terms of languages?
Yeah, so you're just going to create mental connections. So any word that you think of in the new language is going to call to mind a mental note card or mental cue card. So just a quick example, I teach Korean in the online memory school. In Korean, the word for pea, like a green pea that you want to eat, is kong. I would write that out phonetically like Kahng. It doesn't sound exactly like Kong, like King Kong, but what you could do is build a mental note card of King Kong. You imagine that King Kong is scarfing down this gigantic green pea, all right? With that locked in, you later need to recall what is the Korean word for pea. As soon as you think of that green pea, you're right away going to see King Kong eating it. That's going to remind you of the word that you had been studying, which was Kong. That's not all there is to it. That's one example. You'll probably want to find common syllables that you're encountering in the language as well. Come up with images for that. But if you want to check it out in memoryschool.net, I teach you Korean and make it clear how to apply it towards any foreign language. And one thing I didn't know is that access is for 2 devices. So if you wanted it for personal professional use and you wanted to give your child or grandchild access on their device, that's actually included in the one fee, access for 2 devices. So keep that in mind. It can benefit multiple family members. Any other questions?
Yes, Sharon.
So I was a special ed teacher and I used to do that all the time with kids for memory. But what I found is when I gave them the sort of mnemonic device, the association, it wasn't as effective. Like it's more effective that they come up with it. Do you find that too?
Absolutely.
Like our story. Like we make up the story instead of.
Absolutely. So that's 100% correct. So how I teach people to develop these skills, first, I guide you like today in the very beginning, I would start to guide you through my visual so you get an idea for how the techniques work. But for instance, in my online training, I then slowly transition into having you do it more and more on your own, right? Because of course, once you start to develop the memory skills and you know how to use the techniques and you implement the techniques with your own imagery, it is much, much more effective, as you've just outlined. Absolutely.
Thank you, Chester. Well, we are at the top of the hour. Thank you so much. It was amazing. I think it's not just my opinion. I think I will be, talking from everybody. Yep. It's absolutely amazing presentation. Thank you. And it's so nice that we started our year on such a high note. Thank you so much and have a wonderful rest of the week. Nice weekend, and we'll see you next week.